Do me a favor, Tech, can you turn off your audio on your computer?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. I am your host, Danny Nierenberg. Needless to say, it's been a crazy week politically, and I assume we'll see a lot more turbulence in the days to come. But one of the things that really keeps me going is that I continue to be inspired by food system advocates, activists, academics, business leaders, and elevated policymakers and enlightened policymakers in the United States and around the globe. These are folks who are really continuing to move ahead on creating a more economically, environmentally, and socially sustainable food system. And this is despite, so many challenges that they face. I've had a really interesting week talking to folks like Ruth Richardson from the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, who is now the chair of the UN Food Systems Summit Champions Network. The Champions Network is bringing together and really mobilizing a diverse range of people in every region of the world to call for fundamental transformation of the world's food systems. And they're really some of the most interesting people on the planet. And Food Tank will be facilitating a series of discussions co-hosted by Ruth and me and supported by the International Fund for Agricultural Development with many of the champions starting on January 29th. And I hope so many of you can tune in because we'll all learn a lot from them. The discussions will also be available on our podcast, Food Talk with Danny Nierenberg. And again, please watch and ask questions live. These are really, really interesting people. Today, I get to chat with a champion of a different sort, but certainly someone who cares deeply about transforming our food systems. Timothy Childs is an entrepreneur, super taster, I love that term, an award-winning innovator whose personal approach to creative disruption champions the deployment of new systems to update archaic industries. Timothy is the co-founder and CEO of Treasure8, a San Francisco-based food innovation and technology company on a mission to solve the nutritional challenges and environmental stresses of a growing population. He and his partner in life and in work, Anessa, have been really, really great friends to me personally and to Food Tank. So Timothy, so nice to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Danielle. So nice to be here. You're one of my favorite people to talk to in the world. So this is a pleasure.
It's mutual. It's mutual. So for our audience who is either listening right now live or tuning in via the podcast, can you describe what Treasure8 is and what it does?
Sure. What do we have? A couple hours, or
your elevator pitch would be great.
So at Treasure8, hi, welcome everybody. It's nice to have this platform to speak, have a conversation with Danny, to talk a little bit about what we're doing. So yeah, it is kind of a chaotic week to say the least, but we're just really happy to be part of the conversation about how we can work together and kind of make some impact here. So what Treasure8 is about is at its essence, it's about figuring out how to, on a very large scale, reduce the cost of nutrition, of food, in distribution systems. And it has to be done at very large scale. So we have a mission. And our mission is, we call it a resource revolution. And our purpose is to deploy nutrition for humanity. So in order to do that, we have to look at the food system systemically and be able to focus on a number of pillars across the way to reduce the cost of each one of those parts of the supply chain and the process chain in order to bring down the cost of nutrition. Because if you notice, it's hard to get really good quality nutrition in convenience stores and food deserts and so on and so forth. So that's in essence. And then we, at the core of it, we call ourselves a technology and a partnership platform. So we're kind of more like a utility, not a Swiss Army knife, and we are a single purpose company. And so the idea is we have this platform, and that platform actually has a number of subsidiaries underneath it. And those are set up to attack different parts of the food system, from dehydration to pulling nutrients out of food, to be able to do a lot of process development, product development, so on and so forth. So in essence, it's just a long-term play that's designed to look at the different parts of the supply chain, excuse me, and then come up with better, faster, cheaper ways to solve for that. And then bolt on to that partnership platform, our large-scale partners, large-scale CPG partners and growing partners and retail partners to pull that through. Excuse me.
Great. I don't know if Timothy cut out, so we'll come back to him in a second. But I think one of the most interesting parts of what he does is this resource revolution angle. You're back, Timothy.
Oh, so it dropped off. Okay.
Yeah, at least on my end. I hope not for other folks. So just to get back, you use this term resource revolution, and I think that's very sort of important to what you do. Can you describe what you mean by that?
Absolutely. So can you hear me now?
I can.
Great. So what that means is, in order for us to really look at how the food system works from a triple bottom line perspective, right? We really do need to look at not just food waste, right, but the entire way food's being processed and distributed and consumed, so on and so forth. That requires a kind of a mind shift, which is already in place. It's awesome that a lot of people are already, now on the bandwagon after the last 10 years of pushing on this. It's awesome to see really people taking action. So the resource revolution is about thinking or changing the mindset about, instead of just consumption and waste and leaving a bunch of food in your fridge, or like, I've got all this packaging, I'm just throwing a thing. It's just to change the consciousness of people's approaches to things. And the consciousness starts with both on the consumer side, but also on the corporate side as well, to be able to rethink about their packaging. They're utilizing the waste streams that they have, and thinking about more smarter, better, faster energy systems, right? So it's the whole kind of approach to rethinking how things are being currently done. And so we have a very systemic process that we developed, this 11 pillars, to actually approach how you can look at a large-scale food system and supply chain and including distribution to reduce those costs and reduce the carbon impact, and to also, most importantly, pay attention to the stakeholders along the way, and have stakeholder improvement programs as well, because you've got to, now is the time to really think about triple bottom line approach to doing business, and more so. So it's got to you have to look at it holistically and systemically in order to make that change. And so we've synthesized that and distilled that into a term we call resource revolution.
And how did you come to sort of start thinking this way, Timothy? I know you have an extensive background in many different, kinds of innovation. How did you come to sort of dream up Treasure8?
Great. So I've got my background is a technologist. So specifically, I'm a computer-aided conceptual designer. So I've used a lot of tools along the years, and got a background in virtual reality and real-time 3D computer graphics, but also machine learning and machine vision. So before I got involved in the food business, actually I was kind of one of the first food tech pioneers out there in the modern era. And before that, just real quick note, I want to call out one of the pioneers I learned from was a guy named Ed Hirschberg, who's our patron saint, and he just passed this last week, 95.
Wow.
I just want to give honor to him, because it was because of his mentorship and his guidance that I was able to kind of do what we're doing here. So I just wanted to say a heartfelt thank you to Ed and his family.
Great.
So as a background in technology, I developed a number of weird systems that use machines to see the world. And the last thing I did before the chocolate business was to build machine vision systems for the space shuttle. So low cost, smart ways to do stuff. And that's kind of what we do. We have a whole approach, and I'll explain that in just a second. So then I kind of leveraged, I fell into the chocolate business. And somebody pulled me into it from a business I had acquired. And that's where I started Cho. So Cho was kind of technology chocolate, and it was my initials as well. But with that, I used the same process that we developed, pretty much for the innovation we did in the technology space, where we look at big complex systems and breaking down into subsections, right? And then kind of reinvent those things and see if we can find other faster, better solutions off the shelf elsewhere. Like in the chocolate business, I grabbed a turkey roaster from Ronco turkey roaster to make it a low cost roaster and all sorts of stuff. How can we make it better, faster, cheaper? So that seemed to work. I was able to disrupt the cacao supply chain successfully, and with a key eye on stakeholder livelihood improvement. but also with a green footprint before green was a thing. And really, how do we work on freight efficiencies? How do we work on lower carbon impact, but also making higher quality product at a lower cost and improving the livelihoods of people along the way? So that model worked quite well, and so that's off and running, and those farmer programs have impacted hundreds of thousands of people along the way, and I'm very happy about that. It's one of my favorite things we've created. And then, so when I was in the chocolate business, I saw how, it was pretty dinosaur, how it approached stuff. So coming out at a tech angle, we're able to kind of, move quickly, and through that, kind of develop this process. And so when I was in the chocolate business, I saw there was my peephole into the food system. And so I saw how kind of, I hate the word broken, but I saw how inefficient it was, right? So, and I look at food as an energy system, right? So I saw just all this leaky energy everywhere. And so I said, well, why don't we apply this approach that we've been doing for years? Why don't we try that to the food system on Toto, right? So, and what I identified through that process was the biggest challenge is to be able to get the lack of good nutrition in the current supply chain. That's it. I mean, that's why look at COVID, right? All these pre-existing conditions, are often because of poor nutrition, and it's not. It's nutrition drives health. So what we really set out to do was, this near impossible task to really look at it systemically, and through that, kind of long story short was that one of the key parts in order to do that is to work on capturing the nutrition at source as fast as you can, but also dehydrating and stabilizing it. Right, because if you can capture food at source, often it can be fresher. You have more nutrients than fresh that you get in the store. So we spent a lot of time getting that technology in place and commercialized and scaled, and I'll stop there. But that's how we got involved with Treasure8. So we started.
And I'm particularly interested in sort of, you're dehydrating foods to capture the nutrition, but we have so long, focused on this kind of cult of fresh, like fresh foods are the best foods, or, people didn't for a long time, really until COVID, I think, appreciate the value of frozen foods, of, preserved foods, of dehydrated foods. Do you think that that's still something that's hard for people to overcome? I mean, you're producing a lot of ingredients for other CPG companies, but how do you overcome for that obstacle of people being like, no, I don't want dehydrated food as the ingredient?
That's a great question. So there's about three things to that, right? So kind of on the last thing first is we are working primarily business to business, B2B, and to be able to supply, ingredients at large scale. That's what we're ramping up to do, to be able to put into bars and snacks. We have our number of snacks, but then there's a lot of parallels to this to frozen food, right? So one of our key advisors, Ryan Shedrick Wilson, she was a part of Milken, but she was one of the lobbyists for the frozen food industry, right? And so a lot of the frozen food industry did a really good job of explaining how frozen foods, not about environmental impact, the nutritional impact, you can capture foods while they're ripe and then freeze them and then deliver them frozen, often have a higher nutrient load than what you get fresh because stuff degrades as soon as you pick it. The vitamin C and the polyphenol start to go down. So there's a really strong argument that's been around for a year, but they did a really good job of, they did a pretty decent job of explaining the value of it, right? So I think a similar thing needs to happen in dehydrated. And the other thing that's interesting is as we're going through this, adjustment, scramble to get more food, into people's, pantries and mouths during this COVID situation, you see most of the conversations are about how can we increase or utilize the cold supply chain, which I think is and not the whole picture. So what we would love to do, anybody out there that can help us, we'd love to see some policy with the new administration, the policy towards shifting the thinking about it's not just getting fresh through the channel. It's about let's dehydrate, especially the stuff that's going bad in the channel, but also let's work on a nutrition security policy that actually has dehydration as part of it. So there is, but we're also, the cool thing is that some of the partnerships we have yet to announce are fairly substantial, large companies that are looking at changing consumer behavior through the way people are buying and shopping by communicating the value of dehydrated food, right? Because it doesn't go bad in stores. And then, if you can store a thing of strawberries for years and years and years versus I get it, right? And they just taste amazing, right? Especially with our technology. That's kind of the secret weapon, is that our technology allows us to freeze dried and dried foods in a way that tastes like fresh, that have higher nutrients than other freeze dried process and stuff like that. So it's actually even better than you've tasted before. So
well, and I think go ahead. No. I think what's interesting about it to me is that, COVID has exposed so many cracks, and we talk about it all the time, and I don't want to get too much into that here, but I think this is not our last global shock, right? So we have to build a food system that can withstand, that can be resilient, and it's, you're right, it's not just the cold chain, it's figuring out other ways to make sure that nutrition gets to people when they need it at a low cost, and something that they can store. And I think that's, some of the wording that we've seen over the last, 11 or 12 months, these are foods that are highly storable. You can use them for a long time. And they provide a lot of nutrition and deliciousness. We don't want to forget that here, because I've tried, your dehydrated strawberries. They're great. They're better. I don't like fresh strawberries, and I like these. So it's, there's a part of this that is, it's not just about getting nutrition at a low cost. It's bringing that flavor and palate pleasing things to folks.
Well, that's a couple of things. Anything we make is excellent, and it's got to taste great, and people got to love it. Otherwise, you're wasting your time, right? So it has to be awesome. So that's a key leg up you have to do to make it work. There's a couple of things though that's kind of interesting on trend wise. I think is that we're starting to see people rethink what food security means, right? It's about nutrition security, right? So the food system itself, a lot of the stuff that's in food security is the things that are making people obese and sick, right? So the corns and rices of the world and stuff, these are empty calories basically. So it's better to have something than nothing, but if we're going to continue to feed people the stuff that's making them sick, it's just this perpetual cycle. So I think we're starting to see shifts of people looking at it as a nutritional security. So that's why when we say deploying nutrition for humanity, it's not food, it's nutrition. And so there's a couple tricks that we've got up our sleeves that we're planning to do this on a large scale is how do we actually valorize some of the nutrients out of the waste streams and apply them back into the foods, right? So how do we enrich the foods themselves that are already awesome, that have long shelf lives, and then how do we can we boost them? That actually has even more nutrients than what they would have originally, right? With their own bases. So this is really about, and then the other thing that you really start to get your head around it, where you start kind of get super excited about it, is that the freight efficiencies, right? What does that mean? That means you can get more, like for example, we can get the same nutrition load out of 10 containers of pineapples, right? You have all the crowns and the skins and all that stuff. We get the same nutrient density in one container, right? By dehydrating the parts of it, and then we can also reuse the parts of the pineapple in different forms, right? There's all sorts of bromelain and all sorts of stuff that you can pull out of those things. So when you start really looking at just not delivering nutrition, but the cost for delivering and the carbon impact that you have for it, it really gets the attention of folks that are really looking at the entire goals and pledges to be able to be carbon neutral in the period forward, right? So it's really just not just capturing and storing it for later, but it's actually rethinking how nutrition is captured at source, put into products like bars and snacks and cereals and all sorts of stuff that people eat all the time, increasing that nutrient load in there, but also enriching them with other forms. And that's why you have to have really large partnerships like what we just recently today announced, like with Mariani and things like that, to help pull us through at a very large scale.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this new relationship and partnership with Mariani and why that's so important. I think a lot of folks recognize the Mariani packaging, but they don't always recognize the name.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's really spot on. First of all, yeah, and we're just pleased as punch with that relationship. And what's meaningful about it is one, we really found the right partner, and we've had most of the CPG companies through these doors here, Treasure Island, and it's really important to have cultural alignment, cultural fit, and then alignment
Mm-hmm.
of purpose and interest. And so we have a very deep alignment, and their interest is really to ensure. Sorry, something. I'm trying to turn off a distraction thing here. They exist to kind of inspire healthy living, right? And our tagline is to deploy nutrition in humanity. They're 116 years old. They've been innovating from the start. I think the first ones to use mechanical drying. They're first ones to use stand-up packaging, and there's a lot of incorporating innovations from other people and commercializing at a very large scale. So they're one of the fourth largest fruit manufacturer, fruit dryers in the world, the largest family-run businesses as well. So we have a lot of alignment. But what's awesome about it is, one, we want to have the same outcome, and we want to get more nutrition out to people. And they've been innovative on this front as well. So back in 2017, they're first to actually put probiotics on dried fruit, right? Really thinking ahead. They did solar early. They did their own water treatment systems early. They're very innovative. But they're kind of everywhere, but they're not, the brand's really, you see it when you see it, you know it.
Sure.
But yeah, that's exactly what you're saying. But there's also a big chunk of their business, a sizable chunk of their business is making ingredients and products for other people as well, like the giant boxes. And so what's cool about them, besides this, they're an amazing group of people that we get along. It's like family. But they have a very strong distribution system. All the big boxes, you name it, they're selling products or making products for. And they're moving trucks every day to that.
All over the world, right?
All over the world, right? And so, but mostly in the U.S. and Latin America and Asia and Europe. But that turns into a great relationship. We're working on about 3 different things in our relationship. With one of them is that provides what Dirk, my co-CEO, calls instant operational readiness. And so for us, instead of us having to raise and drop and manage drop the funds and manage these operations worldwide, we're partnering with them. So they're going to be our default go-to manufacturing partner or operations partner in these regions, which is awesome. And then they're also ready to pull just not only our ground roll chips and other things like that through their channel, but also the other products. We made a ton of other products before the products that you're seeing now, so be able to pull all the way through. But the best way I'd say it is that they know they want to innovate, and they accept it, and they want to do it, and they just don't know how. And that's what they say.
Sure.
And we know how, and we don't know how to do the operations as big scale as they do. So it's a really great combination coming together. And they embrace change, and they embrace innovation, and they're so open for trying new stuff. So it's very adventure, and when decisions are made very quickly. All right. So that's such a rarity. It's a sweet spot. For all you entrepreneurs out there, family-run businesses can help you run a lot faster. So,
well, I want to dig into that a little bit more, because you described them being able to embrace change more easily than some of these publicly owned companies, and I think that's an important part of this. And I think it is good advice for entrepreneurs out there who are in the food space, who are looking to partner, looking for investment, looking for people to sort of take on what they're doing. I wonder if that's kind of the future, right? These big corporations maybe are not the ones who are going to be able to take this innovation on, like what you're doing, as quickly as some of the smaller, more privately owned businesses.
I'd say you're right, and I think we're going to see a shakeout as we're starting to see in the food businesses. Right, there's some are going to make it, some aren't. From other people pivoting towards triple bottom line most of them are going to make it. Right, those who too slow to change, goodbye. Right, and well deserved. So I don't shed a tear. I don't shed a tear for that. And so I shed a tear for the people in the jobs, but not the companies themselves. Right, but people that are really taking the risk to put their neck out to chop off a leg to make their, to really be focused on the triple bottom line approach, they're going to win. So with that, we've dealt with a high number of CPG companies on a number of layers, and we've seen the shifts. I won't bore you with it, but now is the time for real action, right? So people are really engaged with it, and budgets are flowing, and it's not just a greenwashing thing or a good washing thing. I mean, they're really it's embedded in the bottom line now, which is what's getting more embedded in the bottom line. But coming to that decision often takes organizations 4 or 5 years to do that, right? It can take a family-run business 4 to 5 months or 4 to 5 weeks, right?
Right.
And so when we really think we've hit our sweet spot. Some of the other partners we're talking with are large family-run businesses, right? Very large, right? And so I think there's just they have there's pluses and minuses to them, but I think it's a really it's especially mission-aligned people. You can just get much more done faster, because also you think about it. A lot of the dynamics in a corporation, people aren't there for the whole life, right? So they're going to come in and they just don't want to screw something up, so they're risk adverse, right? But somebody that's second or third or fourth generation of business, they're not going to get fired, so they're willing to try risks and try things. And so there's this different thing about the kind of the fear profile of trying new things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what worries. Sorry,
what do you see out there? You've got your finger on so much of the pulse.
I'm not sure if I wouldn't say that, but I do share your concern that there's a fear of experimentation at some of these larger companies, right? They are so risk adverse. It's like big farmers, because they've put so much infrastructure in or so much capital in, they can't change practices very easily. It's not their fault. It's just they have to, they're stuck in sort of this stream that they can't swim out of. And so I think, I wonder, and not just because of COVID, but because of consumer preferences, I wonder if companies, these big sort of, monoliths will start sort of breaking up into smaller, medium-sized companies where they can, change more quickly, where they can pivot, which was the word of 2020, and do things differently, and then partner with folks like you who are trying to do the right thing. I mean, this idea of deploying nutrition for humanity is such a huge goal, right? And it takes companies large and small. It takes policy. It takes producers to get on board. But I don't know how we do that when all we have, for the most part, there are, again, great food entrepreneurs out there, but we have these big companies who control most of the food market.
Yeah, right. So, okay, you've nailed it. And I think there's I know how to do it. So any big companies want to know how to do it, give us a call. But meaning, I think those who are too entrenched to make moves internally without risk, right? And remind me to tell you this one part about change management inside of businesses. But I always advocate a sandbox. I always advocate like a special ops team to work with two of them in a sandbox outside the organization where there's a budget and then there's no expectation of the outcome and no control. It's so hard to get done in certain companies, but once that goes, they pivot. So, and luckily the larger companies are looking at open innovation, so it's kind of moving that direction. But also then the easiest way for these people to do is to back in to acquire small businesses that are doing this. But that's such often the death knell for that idea. So it really has to be integrated and the like. And then two things. I'm gonna do a shout out to something for people to track. But one of the things that is unseen because we're working on systemic change, right? We're working on change management inside these organizations. And luckily, I've got great partners like Dirk Hendrickson, who's at Coca-Cola for 21 years, and I've got Chris Coward, who's head of strategy, was at IDEO, helping in change management, and Google X before that. So just really people that help companies transform the inside. So that's part of the value we have when we talk to people. So we live and breathe this thing. One of the things you'd be so surprised is, and when you're trying to figure out how do we handle taking all these gazillions of pounds of things and converting them into other things, it's not the technology is the biggest roadblock. It's the alignment of interests of those inside the organization to do it. So you can have the CEO, the C-suite say, hey, it sounds great, right? Maybe some middle-level folks are interested in it. But by the time these actions get implemented, if the folks that are on the docks, the folks that are their bosses are not in alignment and they're not incentivized. Don't like to use the word incentivized, but
Sure.
Carol Sanford doesn't like that word. Is if they're not in alignment of interest with everybody, it's not going to happen, right? So the biggest challenge for all this is managerial and change management inside your organization, period,
Yeah.
right? And so that's where we spend our time focusing on is help companies rethink it, and the best way to do it is kind of out of the box, I like in the sandbox thing. Now, the other thing I really want to point out is a group that I'm so proud to be one of the founding people in. It's called OSC Squared. It's one step closer. It's OSC2.org. Now we're just calling it OSC. And so it's a great example. So we've got 25 CEOs of sustainable food brands, and really, 1 point something billion in revenue collectively, and really leading the change on how do you actually do triple bottom line thinking? How do you really walk the walk and talk the talk, and then do stakeholder improvement, right? How do you make the whole system healthy? So we've got 20 years of experience doing this. And so it's a really great group of people for any of your listeners that want to see how companies are doing it right, and to glean from, and to be able to, inoculate themselves with this. So check out oscsquare.org. I can't say enough about it.
And I feel like that's what we need, more sharing between corporations and between companies and between innovators who, feel often very competitive towards one another, or, the whole chain as it exists. We need to be, if we're really concerned about fighting the climate crisis and reducing food loss and food waste, if we're really really want to feed humanity, then we can't always be competitive. We have to share resources.
Right. Yeah, cooperation, right? So
absolutely.
And so that's such a commonality for entrepreneurs and smaller businesses. Like, I've started a number of industry organizations in the technology space with standards bodies and stuff, and now in the food space. Often, one of the things I end up having to do is trying to explain to the smaller producers, like, look, we're not going after each other, we're going after this thing, and so we need to arm in arm. We're fighting it out in a store or whatever. That doesn't really matter. Okay, it's how can we take some of their market share? How can we take those who aren't doing it the right way? How can we take as a group, right? And that's really where the power comes from. That where's where the power, because everybody's aligning generally the same pole. That's why OSC Square is so awesome, right? It's because we do stuff that's competitive with each other all the time, but at the same time we'll be cross promoting each other's activities, right? So it's essential. And now's the time. And the nice thing about COVID, in emergencies, people go one of two ways. They kind of go into their own silo and isolation, or they really pull together as a group, right? And we're starting to see, on the top level, the big players, you're seeing levels of cooperation that we never see before, right? So
I love that term, yeah.
Right. And so now is the time to really, and it's Danny, it's up to people like you to really get these folks to really be thinking and stick with this kind of new spirit of, collaboration to make a difference, right? How does it stick after if it ever settles out, right?
Right. Well, yeah, that's one of my fears, is that people will forget this, when we come out the other side of this, and we will, people wear your mask, get vaccinated when you can. But when we come out the other side, I don't want people to forget what we went through. I know I'll want to forget it, because but I don't want people to forget this, this time of collaboration, and where people did come together, not always, but in certainly in what you're talking about. And I love what you said about, it's the innovation, right? You for someone like you and so many food entrepreneurs, that's the easy part, coming up with like creative, wonderful ideas that are, changing the world. But it's the change management. It's that part that's difficult. And that's where we need more of this discussion to be going forward. And so I think that's so important for the food entrepreneurs who are listening, or anyone who's listening, to really understand that's how companies will change.
Absolutely. And then the one other bit of advice I have, at least what I try to encourage people to do, is if you can't design something and make something that can be scaled from the beginning, like, craft this, craft that is great, right? That's a great hobby. But if you really want to make change, you need to be designing your stuff that I make unit one, I'm going to be able to make unit a million of the same quality, the same supply chain and all that. It takes a lot more work, right? But it has to be able to scale. Otherwise, you're going to skip a beat. You've got, customer, dissatisfaction because the quality changes and all that. That's what people need to be thinking. That starting entrepreneurs could really appreciate, use that. But on the other side, what I really think is we're at this really amazing inflection point in general when it comes to what COVID has brought us, right? COVID's also brought us this opportunity, right? This crisis. And I think I'm going to get on my soapbox just for a second.
Please.
Is that I think that if we, I don't want to create fear arousal or anything, but if we don't get it together soon, it's going to be, the problem's going to exacerbate significantly. And here's why: is as we see, more and more people losing their jobs, and less people have less nutritional buying power, right? What do they reach for? They reach for the mac cheese, they reach for the the instant noodles and stuff like that. So as their people are starting to climb out of it, now they're going to be starting eating more and more nutrition. What's going to happen, right? So that's just increasing the comorbidities and all that kind of stuff. So there needs to be a really deep focus beyond just food banks and the stuff. There needs to be a national effort to really systemically look at how can we really get higher nutrition load in the foods that people are eating, right? And now I get them to people, right? So I hats off to the NUMMI Foundation in Oakland that's doing that directly with some of the work that they're doing, but this needs to be done on a governmental level, because if we don't feed people, it's just going to raise up the healthcare cost, and it's just it's a downward spiral. We started coming up of it before COVID, and now it's just driving us down. So that number one way, I believe, is to reduce that, besides bad social practices by stupid people, but one of the ways to keep your resistance up by having healthier diets, right? By helping have healthy bodies. So I think it's critical for national security, right? It's a national security, so we should have a nutritional security policy, right? So
absolutely,
and we have this, and it's got to stick. And then if you really get into it, I'll get off my soapbox in just a second. One of our key focuses for Nessa and I's long term is the first 1,000 days, right? Which is the nutrition set for mom and baby for the first 2 years of the 9 months pregnancy, the 2 years thereafter. The health outcomes of that, just feeding people well at that stage, can change the GDP of a country, right? Reduce the cost of health, the whole thing, right? It just shows that little effort here creates such an inflection point in the outcome of someone's livelihood, right? And education, and all sorts of stuff. That same model, you take that same lens, you apply it to the overall adult food system as well. That's the type of impact it can have. And so I don't think there's any dollar better spent than increasing the nutrition for kids, but also increasing the nutrition of its populace. It's just kind of duh. It's just, now hopefully this stuff that's happening now will cause a rethink about this. And it's a radical time and open for radical ideas. And this needs to be, this is just so simple. It's just
so
hard to get
sense.
Yeah, right. But it's hard to implement, right? It's like good art.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's a great point to end on, that food and nutrition security equal national security, not just for our nation, but for many other countries around the globe. And, our friend Roger Thoreau, who's written extensively about the first 1,000 days, he's such a great proponent of that. He is. And so thank you for bringing that up. Timothy, if people want to find out more about Treasure8, where should they go?
You just make a left, you go to San Francisco. We're right here on Treasure Island. We're moving actually towards Mariana Land, but treasure8.com, just the treasure and the number 8.com. Best way to hit us up, and we're on LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff. So there it is, right there. Just click on that link.
Great.
It's been a pleasure, Danny. You're all. I'll talk to you. I love talking to you, and thanks to you too. You inspire me. You're one of the few people that truly inspires me, Danny. You're just doing it I'm just so proud of you, and all the words you're getting, you need to get more of them, because the hard work and dedication you're putting in this whole thing probably goes unseen by most, and that you're really truly dedicated to this more than anybody I've seen. So keep up the good work, and any way I can help, I'm right behind you.
Thank you so much. Who is unseen in this whole process is my co-founder, Bernie Pollock, who
Bernie.
Food Tank would not exist without him. Thank you so much, Timothy. Give Anessa a big hug for me. Please stay safe. The world needs you, okay?
Likewise. Okay. Take care, everybody. Wear your mask.
Bye.